Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started with today's webinar. Just as a reminder, you will need the microphone, but if you have any comments or questions along the way, please feel free to throw them in the chat or the Q&A specifically, and we'll gladly answer them kind of at any point throughout this webinar. So as far as today's webinar, my name is Sam. I'm a product manager here at Flashtract, and on the call as well as with Ben. He is the head of product, and he'll be jumping in throughout the webinar potentially, and then along the Q&A, he'll be kind of serving some up based on whatever you guys submit, and make sure we address all the questions and comments. So for starters, we'll jump right into it. And today we're talking about compliance. So the email that I went out, the invite for this was the Flashtract Compliance as a Service offering. And one of the things we wanted to do is just take a step back and talk about what do we mean by compliance. We work with a lot of different general contractors and subcontractors, and compliance can mean a lot of different things as far as billing or maybe payroll, but specifically for this webinar and in this context, we're talking about insurance. So as far as compliance goes, whether that's general liability, umbrella, auto, workers' compensation, or any other certificate of insurance that you might be tracking across all your projects and contracts, that's really what we mean by compliance. So why track compliance? So compliance, we know from working with a lot of general contractors, is a kind of an essential risk management strategy. Obviously, it doesn't reduce your risk, it doesn't prevent your risk, right? And accidents happen, and that's why insurance is there. But it's essential to really help manage that risk across your projects and across all the different jobs to make sure that liability doesn't fall on you, but falls on the subcontractor. And specifically, for the construction industry, or why it matters for a lot of the GCs that we work with, we know it's a contractor-heavy industry, right? There's a lot of third parties involved in every contract across every job. It's a hazardous industry. Obviously, building scaffolding or laying foundation and doing framing, electrical work. There's a lot of the work by nature can be prone to accidents and things happening where insurance is essential and to make sure it's in place. And then lastly, it's a lagging cash flow industry. So as we all know, payments throughout the construction space, it takes a long time. And a lot of the subcontractors that the GCs we work with, they aren't necessarily building a company for the long term. They're kind of prioritizing the immediate short-term needs of the business. So when something comes up, when an accident happens, we want to make sure there's proper insurance in place so that subcontractor doesn't have to close up shop and potentially come back to our project or our job and disrupt that. And then now we have a lien filed on our job because we can't. The sub that was doing that had to quit or had to close down shop midway through because of an accident and improper insurance in place. So what does that lead to? So how do GCs that we work with track compliance today? So what we've seen is it's a very manual process, and I'm sure many of you have experienced this, but as a job starts, as a contract is awarded, what we see, the first step is requesting that certificate of insurance from a subcontractor. And that might be, 4 different COIs and a W-9 and a business license. It might be, 6 or 7, just depends upon the project. Requesting those COIs and waiting for them to submit those back to you. Oftentimes that is a very long process, and it's like, it can be very, very tedious. And then from there, once you do get those COIs and that documentation, the subcontractor, then you have to go through and verify all of those. So you have to make sure that, hey, not only did I get the general liability policy, but all the limits and the expiration and the endorsements, all of those things are accurate and up to date, so that if they do fall short or if an accident happens, it is the appropriate insurance in place. And if it's not the right COI, then you have to go back and request a subcontractor to get updated insurance or to get a different policy or add a different endorsement. And they're not insurance experts, so it usually takes a while, or so you may have to end up working with their insurance agent directly. It's a lot of manual touch points just to get the right COI in place. And then you have to track the expiration date, right? Because those always expire just about once every year. And then once those do expire, this entire process starts back over, right? Request a new COI, make sure the insurance is valid, make sure it's correct, adjust if needed. And this happens over the life of the project, and it's on and on and on. So it becomes very manual, especially as you continue to grow and expand, obviously with more subcontractors, more compliance to track. So some of the challenges that come from a process like this is just constant COI requests. Someone on your team or you yourself potentially are constantly requesting COIs and the right insurance in place and making sure that everything lines up as it should. Back and forth communication to get the right insurance. Then manually tracking all the expiration dates, manually verifying that it's continued coverage, right? Just because it's the COI says one thing, is the insurance actual valid and there was no cancellation clauses or anything like that the insurance carrier might have dropped the sub and now they don't actually have valid insurance. And then we have to store that all somewhere, right? All those certificates we need to have on hand so that when the accident does happen, we can reference it, or potentially on a yearly audit, we can pass those on to our insurance carrier. So a lot of different challenges, a lot of manual processes and tedious kind of workflows with tracking and managing compliance today. So some of the things specifically to drill into that we've heard from our existing customer base as they track compliance today is, gathering requirements. It's like pulling teeth to get the subs to submit paperwork, right? They're extremely slow. They're not motivated to pass on compliance data. They're really focused on, hey, I just want to, build, and I don't necessarily, they're not insurance experts. This isn't something that is always going to be top of mind for them. They want to be focused on other things. And then, of course, when it expires, like trying to get that process and kind of restart it again. It's like, hey, I know you just provided this either a year ago or 6 months ago, but it's expired now. We need an updated certificate. And you're in the middle of a project, you're busy, but please get this to us as soon as possible. And it always seems to go ignored for a long time until they're finally tired of getting emails from you or calls from you. And then verifying the documents. There's a lot of work that has to go into verifying, a COI that gets passed on. So some of the things we've heard is it's just too much time to try to verify every limit and every endorsement and all the language from the COIs to make sure it lines up with the policy laid out in the contract. So what we've heard is sometimes it's just, hey, we're just tracking expiration dates. We just don't have the manpower right now to track all the limits and all the aspects of each COI. So only tracking expiration dates, and we're just kind of hoping, or we're kind of expecting not to get burned by insurance, or we take that risk on. And then lastly, if they are tracking, verifying the actual requirements for each COI, it might be a very manual kind of robust tracker that looks something like this, where, hey, I've got a COI, general liability policy, and I have the expiration date. Is that expired? Yes, no. Make sure the certificate holder is correct. The additional assured, the medical expense, personal injury. Make sure all those limits are up to date and what we are required to have on this contract. A lot of work going to maintaining a tracker like this. A lot of manual time spent, and so it's just not ideal. And one of the things we've seen is that leads to increased risk, potentially costly claims, and higher premiums. So meaning, if we're not able to properly track and ensure that our subcontractors have insurance in place, maybe, our insurance carrier, that falls on our insurance, and our insurance carrier starts to raise our premiums to make sure to kind of adjust for those expenses. Those claims start to cost us a lot, and obviously that exposes our risk across every different project and all these third parties. So where do we come in? And this is why you came today, I think. So what we're offering, what we're launching alongside our software is called Flash COI, which is compliance as a service. So that means that you would outsource your subcontractor compliance management to a certified Flashtrack construction and risk insurance specialist. And that process looks something like this. So when we talk about Flash COI or this service, as a service, what that means is we would request the COI, the W-9, and the business license across all your jobs for each of your subcontractors. So as subcontractors and contracts get awarded, we would go in and we would request those COIs. Then we would review those and validate each of those policies to make sure, validate each of those COIs, to make sure it lines up with your defined policies and your defined, requirements for each different contract. And we would correct those. We would work directly with the subcontractor. We would work directly with their insurance agent if needed to make sure that their insurance meets the policy limits that are laid out. And then we track those. We track the expiration dates. We verify active coverage and ongoing across each project. So an example workflow might look like this, right? Where your team is on the top, and then our team, the Flash COI offering, is on the bottom. So to start, as customers come on board with this offering, we work with you during onboarding to define the custom billing rules and the policy requirements. So the billing rules being how strict or stringent can you be for each different insurance. So you need, general liability, auto insurance, workers' comp, and you want those to all be in compliance before the subcontractor is allowed to bill, before they're allowed to get paid, before they're allowed to step foot on a project. Whatever the case may be, we work with you to define that, and you would tell us how strict we should be. Same thing with the policy requirements. As you write those contracts, as those are awarded, you then pass on those policy requirements for that project or that contract or that specific sub individually, and we would take that and we would maintain that and make sure that any certificates that are then created and added in the system line up and meet those requirements that are laid out. Now, we worked with a lot of different contractors, and sometimes there's a lot of variability from project to project, but oftentimes it's, hey, we have a checklist. These are the 9 different compliance documents we need across every project. Maybe there's some difference here or there, but whatever the case may be, it can be as simple and straightforward as that, or it can be project by project based. So after we have the billing rules and policy requirements laid out, and we would, once a job starts, a subcontractor is created or assigned to a contract, we would then create and request those certificates from the new sub. We review those certificates and endorsements to make sure they're all lined up with the policy. And then we would correct those COIs and work directly with the vendor or agent. Now, occasionally there may be some escalations or exceptions, right? We saw this painter needed $1 million policy, just wanted to verify with you or someone on your team that, maybe we can reduce this, or maybe there's an exception here. And say, oh yeah, that's easy mistake. And then your team would make that final decision on that. And we would, work with the sub accordingly. And then after those are verified and uploaded, we would then track the expiration dates and ongoing compliance, at which point your team could review and report on the overall compliance status of all your subcontractors across every project inside Flashtrack. So you'd have access to all the documents, you have access to all the compliance status. You could see that and check on a vendor, a project, or a contract basis. And we'll show what that looks like at the end. So when we talk about verifying from someone on our team, what that looks like is an example of an accord form here, looking at this COI. Are we checking more than just the expiration date, right? What is the policy? What are the limits? Is the insured? Is all that accurate and line up? There's no mistakes here. What is the insurer? Make sure that's all listed in there, and go through this and do dozens of checks, as you can see, and make sure everything lines up to your policy and it's laid out. And then if needed, again, we would correct. So a dedicated account manager that you would have with your team would work directly with the subcontractor or with the insurance agent. Because we know after working with subs, right, they're not insurance experts. We're used to working with subcontractors to help them onboard in Flashtrack, and this is something that our team knows how to do well, and we obviously work with their insurance agent to get any corrections needed, and then keep them informed along the way, of course. So with that, I'll kind of launch into a demo and show you, what would you expect as you come on and you're working with a dedicated account manager, what would you expect to see, and what would your sub expect to see with this Flashtract compliance service? So from here, I'm going to first log in as the sub. So right now I am logged in as a subcontractor. And what I see here as a subcontractor is I have 2 projects. So for this example, we're going to start with this park renovation project. So I've just been invited to this project, just been assigned. And behind the scenes, your account manager would have gone ahead and created and requested these 2 COI documents. So you can see here it says auto insurance and general liability. And so now when the sub logs in, they see, oh, hey, I've got 2 different compliance documents that I need to upload. So if they happen to ignore that, that's fine. I'll show you kind of what that looks like. So they just got invited to this contract, this site work contract. As a sub, I'm going to go ahead and accept this. So now they're ready to bill. So they're going to come down here and they're going to edit and say, hey, I've done 50% of this work, and I've started to remove some of this excess dirt. So now I've got an invoice I'm ready to submit. So go ahead and as a sub submit that. And what I'm immediately shown is, hey, you actually cannot submit this bill when you're out of compliance. So it says click view compliance to upload new documents. So it's like, all right, well, I guess now I will upload the compliance. So the sub would then come in here, go ahead and upload some compliance data. And we'll see here, put in an expiration date. And to me, they've gone to pending review, and do the same thing for this one. General liability. Come over and say, yep, expires in a year. Save. So now the subcontractor is done, and then your dedicated account manager would be notified that these documents are ready to review. So then I'll log back out, and I'll log back in as the general contractor. So coming back to, so now I'm logged in as a general contractor. I'll come back to this Sky Park project, and what we see here are Landworks. Oh, excuse me. I'll come back in. Oh, I'm sorry, park renovation, and a couple projects there. So I'll come back in, and as this project, I'll see the compliance here is pending review. So your account manager would come in, they would review these documents, again, make sure everything looks good, go through kind of limit by limit, line by line throughout this document, and they would either mark it as, hey, not compliant, you need to go back and work with the subcontractor to get this corrected, or compliant. In this case, I'll just go ahead and mark it as compliant. Do the same thing here as well. You can view this document again. And so now you as a general contractor, you will be able to see the subcontractor can submit their bill, you'll be able to see the compliance status, and you'll be able to have access to those documents at any time. And as I kind of touched on, what you'll be able to do in the system is run a report. So I, as a GC, can now come in here and say, hey, I'm curious, what is my overall compliance across all my subcontractors? So I can sort by this, I can add a filter that says, hey, show me the compliance status of all the compliant or reviewed. And I can also view all of these documents at any point and make sure if this is correct or not, or maybe I have an upcoming audit. All of this is in your Flashtract account and you have access to it, and it can be referenced at any point. So as we work to get the requirements uploaded, added, and accurate, you then have the option to come into your Flashtract account at any point and review that and make sure, hey, it looks like we've got a lot in pending review. If you want to ask a question to your account manager, it's the same point of contact, same person to work for. So, and then obviously you can see, hey, maybe we have a few new vendors, or maybe it's on a specific project that this compliance status the vendors aren't compliant yet. You can be aware of that and work through that. So kind of coming back to the slides, what makes what makes Flashtrack different, what makes this offering different is, as you saw, we're tied directly to that billing process. So one of the hardest parts is, again, collecting those COIs and getting the subs to follow through with actually sending the certificates. But with your dedicated account manager and the fact that it's all in one system, we're able to better prompt that subcontractor and give them and make them aware and get that certificate of insurance in the door a lot faster. And then you have a specific account manager. So in this case, it's me. I work with some of our customers, and it's each one of our reviewers are certified construction and risk insurance specialists, and so we're aware these are terms we've heard, and we work with your team to make sure that we're lining up to that policy requirements that are laid out. And then we work only with the construction industry. So not only obviously with billing, with general contractors, but with this compliance offering, it's only for general contractors and subcontractors in the construction industry. So we know what it's like, right? So oftentimes an email is not going to get it done. We pick up the phone, talk with subcontractors, make sure we have a good relationship with them, and work with them to help them get compliant in the system and make sure that their billing process in Flashtrack is as smooth as possible. So rounding down here, one of the things we see, with Flash COI is it helps eliminate that administrative cost. Sometimes our customers have a person that's dedicated just to managing and tracking and requesting COIs, and through this service, we're able to remove that for the team and free them up to do better, to do different work, to do other work that helps kind of win new projects or financial forecasting, whatever the need may be. And it reduces your risk by having somebody who is solely focused on that and is used to doing this day in and day out. It helps drive your risk down by being able to check every box and every line through those COIs. And long term, it can lower your corporate premium because those insurance claims aren't coming onto your policy anymore, or it's not a guess or a risk that where you just have to take on. It's insuring and helping drive every single every single subcontractor to submit and be compliant with their certificate of insurance. So that was our compliance as a service offering. At this time, I want to open up for Q&A, but if you have questions afterwards, or if you just want to take a screenshot of this, please feel free to email me directly at any point, and be happy to follow up with you, either your question or just connect more in more detail as we're kind of launching this service. So I'll pause here and see, Ben, if we missed anything or any questions that are starting to kind of pop up.
Sam, I see one question coming in right now, and it says, what makes Flashtrack outsourced offering different from some of the other solutions in the market, such as MyCOI and TrustLayer?
Yeah, great question. So you'll see a lot of different, compliance management solutions out there. It's like 15 or 20. And I think what comes to my mind is kind of two things we touched on. One, it's all in one system. So it's not another, solution I have to add to my kind of tech stack, right? Where it's all disconnected and I've got compliance over here, billing over here, projects over here. It's all in one where I've got billing and compliance wrapped together. And then secondly, we're only built for the construction industry, right? So that's all we work with as far as our software is purposely built for that. And our team only ever works with construction and subcontractors, where some of the other vendors, it might be real estate or, medical and any other kind of different industries and verticals.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. We have another question coming in. It says, about how long does onboarding take? What can we expect that process to look like?
Yeah, good question. So onboarding can go as fast or as slow as you want. We generally try to lay out two or three calls during the onboarding, depending upon the size of your company and the different needs across your projects. One of the things that we found is very helpful is to do a 30-day window after onboarding is complete, where you and your dedicated account manager and someone on your team start to review the new compliance certificates that come in. So there's overlap there to make sure that, hey, I'm working with Sam on this for this 30-day window, and we are both looking at documents, we're both checking the same thing, we're both coming to the same conclusions that this is compliant or not compliant. So it's just a helpful way for you to feel comfortable with, obviously passing this essential task to us, and then also us to ask questions and make sure we're all aligned. So yeah, 2 to 3 calls could be done in a week, could be done in 30 days, and then after that period, we kick it off with a 30-day kind of left seat, right seat, or we're both doing it together before your dedicated account manager does it on their own for your team.
Awesome, thanks, Sam. We have another one coming in. It says, if I have a insurance audit coming up, typically my insurance agent requires me to provide them with some random samplings of subcontractor insurance certificates. What should I expect if I'm using Flash COI for an insurance audit if I'm using Flashtract to track this information?
Yeah, definitely. And again, I go back to our customers, and you would have access to every single certificate in the system, at any point. So as you're getting ready for an audit, if there's certain requests around, hey, these random sampling of subcontractors, those certificates are in there, and you can export them from the system, through that compliance report, as we showed, exporting that and getting the actual certificate downloaded. It's fairly straightforward, and should be able to be a very smooth audit because all the documents are in one place, Flashtract, right? All the compliance documents are there.
Thanks, Sam. We have another question coming in. It says, is your team helping to create the compliance requirements, or could you just talk a little bit more about maybe how those compliance requirements are being established at the beginning of the service? Yeah,
and that's a good distinction, because our team is very familiar with insurance, and obviously they're certified risk specialists. But one of the things that we want to be clear on is your team, or your insurance carrier would lay out the policy requirements for each COI that's required, or that onboarding checklist for each sub is still defined by your team. That's something that is still going to be separate from our team and your team, where we are saying, hey, you've defined what good looks like and what is required, and we're going to make sure that everything that we get lines up with that and meets those requirements.
We have another question coming in. It's asking Sam about if there are certain compliance requirements that I track just at a vendor level. Does Flashtract support tracking both vendor and project related requirements?
Yeah, definitely. We definitely do. You can make it project specific for each of these compliance requirements, or vendor specific, meaning if maybe a W-9, right? I add a W-9 to a vendor, and then that would be applicable to every project they're on. But maybe they only need, an auto insurance COI for a specific scaffolding project. So I would make that at the project level, or they need different limits from project to project. So as that project is closed or archived in our system, that compliance requirement is no longer, feeding into their compliance status. You can still access that document and go look through that. But if it's project specific, as the project is active, that is a requirement, but as you archive it, it's no longer active. Whereas that vendor level, that W-9 example, it will continue to be less requests, less need to, get a new policy in every single time. As they get added to different projects, that will be, part of the policy.
So another question coming in, Sam, says, can your team set up the requirements for a sub based on us sending you a subcontract, or would you need to specify the requirements?
Yeah, great question. I would say this depends on what the subcontract looks like. On face value, I think the subcontract would be enough. but that would be something we just define in onboarding. What is it in the contract that we're looking for, or that your team would look for, and then we would certainly want to take that burden off your plate, because that would still a very manual task if you have to go in there and make those requirements in the system. That would be kind of a miss on our part. We would work with your team to make sure that we would be able to create it from the subcontract. Just, hey, here's where you look, here's what you need to see, and once we learn that, I think it should be fairly straightforward.
Awesome. We have another question coming in, Sam. It says, can you refresh my memory, but does this keep the history visible up to date? So I guess the question is kind of more related to, do you have like an audit trail around updates and kind of what's going on?
Yeah, so it's always live, meaning whatever the compliance status is at that time, it's whatever each of those documents are at that time. But if a contractor is uncompliant, they upload one document and then a year rolls, they're now no longer compliant, and they upload the next document and the team reviews it. We'll have a track of both those documents under their vendor policy, but what we show is really just what it is right now in the moment. So are they compliant or not compliant based on the current requirements? So I don't know if that answers the question, but hopefully it does. Yep.
Thanks, Sam. So we do have another question coming in. It says, today we track compliance in our accounting or ERP system, and we receive a notification before paying a subcontractor if they're compliant or not. Why would Flashtract be advantageous for us to adopt over this current process?
Yeah, with their integrations, I think, Ben, you might have more exposure to our integrations process. I don't know if you want to take a stab at that question first.
Yeah, sure. So I think the question, being related to what's the advantage of using Flashtract over maybe tracking this in an accounting system today and getting notifications before payment. What we've seen with our customer base is general contractors are trying to move forward as early in the process to make subcontractors compliant again or get these updated policies reviewed. And so most of our customers that were tracking compliance in their accounting system were waiting 30, 60, 90 days before paying a subcontractor, which means that subcontractor could be out on the job site for 3 months without insurance before you would even get a notification in your accounting system. So I think with Flashtract, we draw that window up. We're able to more proactively know when a subcontractor policy is about to expire and proactively reach out to make sure that there's no lapse in coverage. So I think the advantage is just ensuring that you do not have subcontractors on your job site without insurance due to the lag in tracking this in an accounting system.
Yeah, that's great. Definitely good perspective. Well, I'm not seeing too many more questions. If give a few more minutes to letting you roll in, but again, if you think of any afterwards, or if you just want more information, or you want to connect, feel free to email me here, samfloyd@flashtract.com.
I'm not seeing anything else roll in, Sam.
Okay. Well, with that, then we'll end there, and we appreciate everybody's time, and hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day. Thanks for attending.